Welcome back to Orbits Consulting. My name is Manal Zainuddin, Global Education Consultant and founder of Orbits Development Code, an approach for conscious learning and being. This podcast highlights education communities from macro and micro angles, leadership, learning, personal and professional growth across multiple disciplines. Education is holistic and as vast and infinite as the cosmos. As we bring stories, interviews, talks, projects from around this globe, I extend Plutarch's famous quote that I had posted in the schools I have worked in. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. Today, I am very pleased to be joined with a very special guest, Zeina Fayyoumi. Zeina is a very special guest because 12 or 13 years ago, she and I were colleagues in the same educational institution, an international school. And at that time, Zeina and I did not much interact. We were both committed to our work, and we were in different departments. She was in the business studies department and I was in the English department, but we both interacted with high school learners, and that was an amazing opportunity. And later, and just like in every profession, when a professional decides to explore another opportunity, I moved to another school community. Now, recently, our paths professionally crossed again, and we discovered that we share not only the love for education, but also the love for personal and professional development. Today, Zeina is a certified systematic team coach, certified learning and development manager, independent educational consultant, and a certified John Maxwell coach, speaker and trainer. Zeina, I'm very excited for our talk today.
Hello, Manal. It's really a pleasure to connect with you. I know how passionate you are about education and about improvement in all school organizations. So I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Thank you. Same here. Now, before we start, Zeina, it would be really nice to hear about your career journey so far.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I come from a business and management background. I started my career in education back over 20 years ago. I started as a teacher and then a course coordinator, and then I became the head of department. Later, I became a school principal and the head of professional development department. Currently, I am the organization development manager. Throughout these years, I trained, I coached leaders and teachers, and I realized that coaching is way more efficient, if you want, sometimes when it comes to training. So I took the path of coaching, and I became a certified systemic team coach, and later on a certified learning and development manager. And at a later stage, I became a leadership expert and certified coach, speaker, and trainer with John Maxwell team.
This makes our talk actually even more exciting. And this month commemorates Youth Through Youth International Day, and that was on the 12th of this month of August. I already have a resource on my YouTube channel about youth skills, so I invite our listeners to check that. It mainly targets categories such as the NEET, those who are not in education, employment, education, and training, and the less advantaged. But today we will expand on the theme youth with Zeina, who as a certified coach is specialized in youth empowerment and impact through a systematic approach that conducts profile assessment, and I find this personally very important, and directs accordingly, involving youth themselves, their schools, and their parents and guardians. So let's first start with the general skills needed in this 21st century, Zeina.
To be honest with you, Manal, in the last 2 years, it's really hard to talk about education without mentioning COVID, so bear with me.
Yes, definitely.
A crisis enlarges everything, the positive and the negative. The pandemic brought back the pre-crisis vision every educator had, which is the development of equitable, relevant, and quality skills. Now, the concern is back to the picture, calling for reform and highlighting the huge cost of inaction. The urgency and the crisis dictates the behavior of human beings as well as
Right.
organizations, to be honest. So there is no doubt that the pandemic was unprecedented and we're still living the consequences till this moment, and urging everyone in
True.
the educational system to act fast and act according to the patterns they have somehow always worked upon. Meaning that when the virus became pandemic back in March
Mm-hmm.
2020, educational institutions switched to online learning and gave
Mm-hmm.
priority to cognitive skills. Now, even now, as the world lifts its bans, educational institutions are conducting meetings on a regular basis, and they are keen to close any gaps the student had in the last 2 years. And again, priorities are given to
That's right.
cognitive skills. Now, I personally believe that though cognitive skills are crucial, we are required. And as the educator, we are actually demanded to look beyond those, look beyond the literacy and the numeracy skills. Now, back to your question, Manal, if I want to talk about the skills required in general, according to the World Bank, the development of skills can contribute to economic growth, by enhancing labor
Right.
productivity, helping the become more competitive. Yet, surprisingly, a large scale of international assessment point to skill mismatch, as well as a large variation in the returns of education. We're talking about across fields of study, across institutions, and even population groups. And in fact, according to the World Bank, the rising role of technology, climate change, demographic shifts, and all that are changing the nature of work and the skills demanded. And I guess students who are like graduating now from schools or even from universities started to realize that like the skills are different. But to succeed
True.
in a 21st century labor's market, we need a set of skills. The cognitive skills, they come on the top of the list. And I'm sure that all educational institutions or organizations are taking care of that. And here we're talking about literacy and numeracy, as well as creativity, critical thinking, problem solving. And I'm sure we're all covering all these things. The socio-emotional skills, and here I think we come a little bit short. And this describes leadership, technical skills, and I think we realize that we need that more and more, which refers to the knowledge and expertise needed to perform specific tasks. And we're talking about material, tools, and technology. Now, another set of skills, which I believe we all experienced in the pandemic, which is the digital skills. And it's not surprising that it was cross-cutting all of skills like mentioned before, and describes the ability to access, manage, understand, and communicate a set of information and appropriately and safely, let's say. So the set of skills required are all the cognitive, socio-emotional, technical, and digital. But sometimes educators and organizations do give importance to one more than the other, but all of them are actually important in the labor market.
Yes, I fully agree with you. You just mentioned points that we have all considered as educators. And this is interesting when you mentioned four different types of skills, because just a decade ago, and many educators agree with me, we were not talking about these skills. And gradually, and now even more urgently, we have as educators and parents to address these skills.
That's
And
very
there
true.
are also specific skills for the workplace. We have to admit that our learners, our youth, even our sons and daughters may not thrive and may even face serious challenges if they were not well equipped with them.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
very
think
true.
it's also a good opportunity to speak about the specific skills.
Yeah. Again, according to the World Economic Forums, employers believe that critical thinking and problem solving are definitely on the rise. In the next 5 years, they're going to be really demanded. But in newly emerging this year specifically, we're talking about self management, active learning. It was evident in the rise of new subscribers for learning platforms through the pandemic or throughout the pandemic, like Coursera, EDX, and other platforms. The number of subscribers was really rising. And definitely, we're talking about skills of resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. And believe it or not, we've been through all that within that short period of time. Now, for sure, leadership was always on the rise and considered among the most essential ones. Because when we talk about
Mhm.
leadership, it involves working with oneself and with others. therefore covering a wide range of skills required and needed in the workplace. Now, a leader is someone who is self-motivated, communicates well with others, engages in critical thinking, problem solving, active learning, and flexibility. Now, the good news is that all these skills can be refined with practice, whether we're talking about a formal education or extracurricular activities, in addition to whatever employer-sponsored can do later. But we are talking about skills that youth would need in the coming couple of years by the time they graduate. There is no doubt that critical thinking, problem solving, self-management, resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility, in addition to leadership, are really, really demanded in the workforce.
Well, definitely, this is so true. And you mentioned stress tolerance.
Yeah.
You mentioned social emotional skills, and I find this so critical because, the social emotional side has always existed in education. I mean, it is not like the technical and digital skills that have just started to rise in the past years. But the social emotional side, I think, was always overlooked. Personally, I am very happy as an educator that finally we are paying serious attention to social emotional health and well-being. Now, can you add more on that, please, and particularly on emotional intelligence in leadership?
Well, that's a great question, Manal, because as you said, things as we proceed are like rising up. We can see them clearly. And let me start by defining emotional intelligence. When I say someone is emotional intelligent, this is someone who has an awareness of their own feeling. They use them to make good decisions in life, being able to manage moods and control impulses, being motivated and effectively overcoming setbacks and working towards goals. Don't you all want your youth to be that way? Definitely we do. Now, a high level of emotional intelligence helps youth use feelings to identify and solve changes, communicate with others, and make good decisions. This can help them become more self-motivated, and this is what we all look for at some time, be more effective when it comes to communication, and help others become more confident learners. While on the other hand, if I like to look on the other spectrum, I see that students who lack emotional intelligence become less connected to school, affecting them negatively, especially in their performance in the classroom. Now, a lot of research was done on emotional intelligence, and it suggested that we perform better when we are good at recognizing and dealing with emotions in ourselves and others. So emotional intelligence at the end of the day is receiving increased attention in the field of leadership as a critical but necessary important component of a successful leader and successful learner at the end of the day.
Yes, well, this is right. And like I said, I am personally very happy because this is like the missing link. Now, what you have mentioned so far, Zaina, is fascinating, considering that we can notice and harness all these skills in youth. But I think you have also noticed, just as educators and parents ourselves, sometimes the youth do not want to show interest in such type of empowerment and growth. I'm sure that many parents are kind of struggling with their youth. So what do you think are the impediments that may hinder this interest for empowerment and for leadership and innovation?
That's very true, Manal. That's very true. See, at this age of youth, we're talking about youth who are between 15 and 18 years old. This is the peak time for leadership in school clubs and activities, but it's again possible to witness a decline in interest in some activities. So in order to understand that, let's try to understand what type of growth they are actually going through, if you want. There's a growth in their thinking, there is a social growth, and there is an emotional growth in the youth at that age. Now, when it comes to their thinking, they are able now to think about the future and make realistic plans because they are mastering abstract thinking. And now they can imagine things. And this is the time where you start asking them and they start to have a vision of what do they want to be in the future. And you start asking them, like, what are you preparing yourself to be? Second thing is, like, when it comes to social growth, they are able to understand much of what others are feeling, especially if they are not wrapped up themselves in the feeling. And this is the time where relationships start to form. And it's very well known that friendship that form at that age, they are often sincere, close, and long-lasting. So they started to create these relationship with their environment. And finally, we're talking about emotional growth. And at this stage, there are two important emotional growth that students actually go through, which is independence and the identity. Now, understanding what do youth go through at that age, it's somehow give us a hint of what barriers actually they face when it comes to growing, or like talk about their activities when it comes to leadership or their interest in growing and their personal development. Number one is the lack of trust by young people in decision-making systems, especially when there is a lack of clarity about the roles and responsibility and minimal power giving to them. They would lose interest directly. And again, we're talking about insufficient time. Here, like they have their education, sometimes they have family, friends, commitments. This becomes another burden on them and becomes like no longer enjoyable for them, you know? And finally, we talk about skills deficit. We talk about verbal skills, public speaking skills, and lack of confidence. This is something that youth go through. And if we do not pay attention to that, yes, I would say clearly that students are not interested, or youth are not interested in the activities. Now, does this mean the barriers come only from youth? I don't think so, because I think as adults, as organizations and parents, we do have a role as well. Because an organizational mindset, sometimes they recognize participation of young people in theory, but not in practice. You got what I'm saying?
Correct.
And sometimes when it comes to parents, they feel that the more I'm going to give them power, they're going to fear the loss of control over young people, and they become more confident, more independent, and that makes them a little bit scared. They're reluctant to give them that jump, you know, that leap of faith. Finally, as we all know, sometimes there is a financial and time limitation when it comes to organizations and to parents as well.
Well, yes, this is fascinating. These are very important points. And unfortunately, some of us, although we know about this, but we are not taking the right steps to at least try to reach this midway between us and the youth so that we can trigger this interest in them. Because if they're not interested, we cannot do anything. We have at least to show sincere acknowledgement and appreciation of what they are trying themselves to do. Well, Zeina, this year's Youth International Day 2021 has a very significant theme. And like you mentioned at the beginning, it was enforced on us by the coronavirus. So the theme is transforming food systems, youth innovation for human and planetary health. And the United Nations and organizations are emphasizing the role of the youth in innovation. In other words, trying to find youth-led solutions for the achievement of sustainability development goals and the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the skills that you have mentioned so far do highlight innovative leadership and empowerment, but I'm interested in knowing your opinion. How do you think our youth handled COVID challenges?
Wow. See, there's no doubt that everyone had their own share of challenges during the pandemic, whether we're talking about
adults,
we did. We all did. Yeah, I want to address it from, let's say, different aspects. Let's talk about education at first.
Yes.
For me, the switch to online learning, there is no doubt that was challenging for us as educators, for us as parents. But you'd be surprised that this generation is more tech savvy than any other generation. And this was evident not only in the speed students were able to catch up with the challenges, but in the quality of their output. Students were creative and giving assignments and homework. And while teachers struggled at some point, the majority of students were at ease to the ones who are actually in uni right now. This generation is definitely tech savvy, you know?
Right.
Now, when it comes to curriculums, educators have done their best to overcome any gaps. Like, definitely, they have done everything they can. They differentiated their instruction. They made sure that they give everything to students. And on the other hand, let's be frank here, students, they did take responsibility for their learning because they know that teachers are not there all the time. So they were taking responsibility. And this is something we all wanted. We all wanted our children and students at the end of the day to take responsibility and not to depend on us as educators.
Absolutely.
Even when it came to physical education, some schools have tried their best to keep their students active, whether by giving them extra sessions or subscribing them to some coaches, but they did their work. What I'm concerned about is the emotional well-being of youth, because this is where students struggled, I believe. During these difficult times, they were subject to increased family stress and financial
Right.
insecurities. And I bet we all went through that. And youth at that
Yes.
age, they do sense and they do get the vibes. And though sometimes they don't want to show it, but they definitely were under a lot of stress. Now, let's not forget that at this age, youth are going through social growth, we mentioned earlier. Now, the social isolation did put a lot of stress on them, not being able to see their friends, not being able to go out, to mingle, to have the normal life they used to have. That did put a lot of stress on them. And the closure of schools affected their mental well-being. When their teachers,
Correct.
their classmates, they used to provide some sort of social and emotional support. At this moment,
Definitely.
they were not able to access psychological support offered by the school. And we're talking about school counselor, nurses, social workers. They were deprived from all that. So what I care about, even when the schools are going to open again, let's try to make these children and youth back to that nest that they actually had. Make sure that they are there, emotionally taken care of. Definitely cognitive skills are going to be covered, and there is no doubt, like, organizations are doing their best, but let's not forget about that. We need to make sure that these students feel safe again at the environment that they are in, because this is much needed.
Yes, I fully agree with all the points you have mentioned, mainly due to school closures. I understand, and I think we as mothers as well, we all have seen that in person.
Very true.
We are summing up now, and throughout this episode, we are sending a message to mainly to schools and to parents. We will start first with schools. So we both agree that we all have massive roles to play as educators. So how do you think, if you can give some practical strategies, how do you think schools can nurture youth and effectively tap into their potential?
Let me first point out that student leadership enhancement gives students opportunities to practice a range of leadership skills in a supportive, learning, and social environment where successes and errors are perceived and received in a very positive way. Yeah, now giving the ability to these youth to analyze their strengths, their weaknesses, set personal professional goals, that would help them when it comes to their self-esteem, their confidence, and their motivation. How can this be done?
Correct.
Number one, look for leadership potential in everyone. See, everyone is a leader. According to John Maxwell, leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. If you can influence your
Correct.
sibling, you're a leader. You influence your friend, you're a leader. So every student you have in your classroom is a leader. So look for the potential in every one of them. Take the time to give them feedback and build their self-confidence. It's a very important point over here, because when these students are going to feel confident, they'll be able to give you whatever they have, especially if we're talking about a safe environment where successes and errors are processed and reviewed. Now, engage them, give them the chance to lead projects and activities. And I totally understand that you need to monitor, you need to make sure that things are like processed the way that you want, but give them the chance to lead and provide training and guidance on how to develop these leadership skills. Sometimes you have it, but you don't know that you have it. And sometimes you need someone to guide you throughout the way. And when you do, it will facilitate the transition into the community and into the world. You are sending these students to the world. You need to make sure that they are ready. So that's for the organizations to actually do.
Yes, that's perfect actually, because after all, they need guidance, and even the team itself needs guidance regarding that. Now, I think also the parents have no less massive roles.
Definitely, definitely. It might look surprising, but leadership begins at home. As a parent, you have an opportunity and a responsibility to initiate leadership qualities in your children as you grow up. Now, how do you
Correct.
do that? See, children will look at you for your guidance in every situation. Youth definitely
Right.
do the same. They are constantly watching your behavior and your attitude,
Correct.
and will do anything to get your approval, and that
Right.
includes mirroring your behavior. So walk the talk. That's number one. Number two, teach conflict resolution. Now, we all heard that, like, when it comes to children fighting, let them fight, let them deal with their own issues. That's very true. But every fight or every conflict, if you want, is a teaching moment. I'm going to get them and I'm trying to understand, let them understand how to resolve the conflict with the least damage possible. If you want, use it as a teaching moment. And finally, build up their confidence, because when a child is confident in their own abilities and comfortable in their own skin, they will truly believe that they are enough, they'll treat others better, they'll make better choices, and
Correct.
they'll try to lift everyone higher. See, I have a saying, and I say it all the time: we have to take care of our youth because they will be taking care of our future. So it is our responsibility because they are the future.
Yes, I fully agree with you. That's very powerful, Zaina. And I guess we both agree that when we imagine the impact that our youth can have on our communities, we seriously start thinking about what we are missing by not nurturing those skills. Zaina, our talk was fascinating today, honestly so, and the points you have addressed are truly inspiring. Now, this theme is deep, but unfortunately, we have to end our talk for today. Thank you, Zaina, again for all your insights.
Thank you, Manal, for hosting me. It was really a pleasure to get the message out there. I know you're doing a great, and hopefully, we're making our world a better day at a time.
We all are. Yes, we all are. Now, anyone who is interested to know more about youth leadership, please feel free to contact Zaina Fayoumi. I will leave her email address in the description area. And now we close our podcast episode with our routine, the open ended question for all of us to ponder. And since this is a guest episode, I am very happy to leave this question to our guest, certified John Maxwell coach, Zaina Fayoumi. Zaina,
What are you doing today that will make tomorrow a better day?